This month's mystery kit contains 5 approximately 8-inch squares. And in addition to those squares, you are going to need some freezer paper. You can get freezer paper on the rolls from the grocery store. It is in the same section as sandwich bags, plastic wrap, aluminum foil, and it comes in different length rolls. If you choose to use the roll, you will need to trace the pattern, and I'll show you the pattern in just a minute. I'm going to use freezer paper that is available in 8.5 by 11 sheets. The nice thing about the 8.5 by 11 sheets is rather than tracing, you can run it through a copier, and you could also print patterns from your computer using it in your printer. You could still trace on this. It doesn't have to be run through the printer. And the reason we need freezer paper is we are going to transfer this pattern to the freezer paper and then cut on these lines. Let me show you first how to get your copy onto the freezer paper sheets. Okay, I am using my home copier / printer / scanner. I have placed the pattern on the glass, and every copier or printer I have ever used, if you have a certain size of the paper you want to print on, it usually goes down in the tray. And I don't know if you can see this on camera, but freezer paper has a shiny side and a dull side. This is the shiny side. I do not want to print on the shiny side. I want to print on the dull side. So I'm going to put the dull side down in my copier, close the lid, and say copy. And there's my pattern transferred to the freezer paper. So now I'm ready to adhere it to the fabric. You only need 1 freezer paper copy. You do not need 5 of them, just 1. Once you have your pattern transferred to the freezer paper, your next step is to stack up your fabrics. The pattern does give an order. You do not have to follow that order if you don't want to. Each star block is made up of 2 colors. There's a background and a star. When you stack them, the 2 colors that are next to each other will be in the same block, and then the fabric that's on the very top of the stack and on the bottom of the stack will also be in the same block. So I'm using an ironing surface, and I put the brown block down first, and I am following the order in the pattern, and press it so that it's smooth. Then take the next color, and that would be the gold. Stack it right on top of the brown. If your edges don't match exactly, it doesn't matter. Just keep it centered as much as you possibly can. Press the gold on top of the brown. And the reason to press these one after another is that ironing them sort of helps them adhere together. You don't have to iron, but I find that it just makes things, there's static or something that makes them stick. After the gold comes the red. After the red comes the green. And after the green comes the beige. And once the stack is all put together, then grab the pattern that you copied onto the freezer paper and make sure you're getting the one that's the freezer paper. Again, there's a shiny side. You want to center that star over our stack, and you could actually have cut off your excess down at the bottom because you could use that in something else. And then press. And the reason freezer paper is such a cool tool in quilting is that when you press, the shiny side, the plastic side, will adhere to the fabric. Now it's only adhering to that top level. My next step is to take this whole stack all together and move it to a cutting surface. Once I have it on a cutting surface, I need a straight edge. Any straight edge ruler will work. And I'm using the 60mm rotary cutter. The bigger blade makes it easier to cut through more layers of fabric. I just need to line up so I can cut on the line, and I'm going to go all the way around the edge first. And you really don't want to be shifting this stack while you're cutting, so either use a rotary mat or a small mat that you can twist. Second cut. Okay, once I have my square cut out, now I need to cut apart on the other lines. The pattern does give you the first 2 cuts to make. If you'll notice, this one is cut number 1 and this one is cut number 2. Whenever you're cutting, you want to pick the next cut that goes all the way across the piece that you have. So cut 1 goes from this side to this side. Once that side is cut off, then cut 2 goes from this side up to here. So one, and you will kind of need to shift this out of the way because you don't want to cut up into here. And cut 2. I could probably use a new blade on my rotary cutter. Since I did shift it, I need to get it back in exactly lined up. That looks pretty good. Scoot that one out of the way. Now if I look at this unit, the next cut that goes from edge to edge is the one between C3 and C1. Here. And I can take this piece, move it out of the way. And do my last cut on that unit. I do still want to keep the stacks together, but once they're cut, it doesn't matter if they don't stay exactly lined up. So on my middle unit, my next cut is here to here because it goes all the way across the block. Sorry. Then I can move it out of the way. Now this one, my next cut is between B3 and B1 because it goes all the way across the unit. And that's my last cut. Now I have my original pattern down on the board, and I'm just going to use it to help me keep track of what pieces are which. So I'm going to take my stacks that I cut and stack them up on the original pattern. And then my next step is to remove the freezer paper from the top layer. I'm going to show you on one piece, and after that I'll do the rest off camera. You just need to find an edge and it peels right off. And actually, if you were using this freezer paper for other patterns, you can use it more than once. It will usually adhere 4 or 5 times. So let me go ahead and remove all the rest of the freezer paper pieces. I set my background freezer paper pieces back on just so you could obviously see which part is the star and which part is the background. So now I'm going to take them off. My next step after removing all the freezer paper is to rotate the stacks so that my star and background are not all one color. So for each of the star pieces, I'm going to pick it up, take the top piece off, and move it to the bottom of the stack. So now I do have a two-color block. My next step is to start sewing, and we're going to sew pieces A1 and A2 together to start, and that is that piece and that piece. So I will do that, and then after that we're going to sew B1 to B2 together, and that's that piece and that piece, and C1 and C2 together, which is this piece and this point here, and C1. So after I get those sewn, I'll come back and show you where I am. When I'm sewing these, they're not going to come out exactly the same length. So I'm just going to pick a spot and stitch it with my 1/4 inch seam. Okay, I've sewn all the A1 pieces to the A2 pieces, all the B1 pieces to the B2 pieces, and all the C1 pieces to the C2 pieces. And the pattern tells you to press toward the star fabric in each block. You are welcome to use the iron if you want, but I chose to finger press because there are bias edges galore on these pieces. My next step is going to be to sew the A1 and 2 pieces to the A3 piece. Now, you may not have a straight edge. I mean, look at this one in particular. You're going to need to straighten the edge. So I'm going to straighten an A unit, a B unit, and a C unit for you, but yours may look slightly different. You're only straightening on the side that is going to be sewn to the next unit. So my straight edge is here, and I'm going to be sewing it to here. So I'm going to take the straight edge on my star piece and cut off that tail. So now, when I go to sew to this piece, I have a straight edge to sew them together. And I'll just sort of center this onto this piece. So that's the C, nope, that's a B unit. This is the A unit. And it's going to go this way, so my edge to square up is here. And this one actually doesn't look too bad, but it's probably not perfect. Just take a sliver off of it. And then this is my C unit, and it's this edge that's being sewn to this piece, so I need to square this up. And you can tell which one it is by looking at the pattern where you're going to sew it together. Again, my point, or my star edge, is the straightest piece. And I can just trim it off. I'm going to do it to all of each of those units. And then I'm going to go ahead and sew the C1 and 2 units to the C3 unit. The A1 and 2 units to the A3 unit. The B1 and 2 to the B3 unit. All my A pieces are now sewn together, all my B pieces are sewn together, and my C pieces. The next step is to put those 3 units together, and the pieces need to be straightened only on the sides where they're attaching to another part. So, on the B unit, it's across the top here. On the A unit is going to be across here and across here. I'm choosing to go ahead and just do the A and B first, and then I'll come back and straighten this and the bottom side of the C. It's exactly like we did before. This is the B unit, and this is the side we're going to be attaching. So I want to put a ruler on here and get a straight line. And each one might be slightly different. It doesn't matter because we're going to be squaring up this block later. So on my A unit, I want to straighten this side to be attached to the B. In each case, I'm just picking where I can cut the least off and still get a straight edge, because I want something to square up when I get done. So I will do that to all the A and B units and sew them together. And those are going to go together. If you want to, this would be the only place that you would need to match in the whole block, and it would probably look best to match that seam with that seam. And you will need to pin to do it. Poke a pin through where you think it's going to be at a 1/4 inch mark and here to line them up, because you can't do it this way or they'll be offset. Hold on a second, let me get a pin. I'm going to put the pin through here at roughly a 1/4 inch, and if you're really concerned, then mark your 1/4 inch line on the back. Whoops, that's the wrong side. I want to do it from this side. At about a 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to come in at about a 1/4 inch here and put those straight sides together and stitch. If you don't choose to match them, it's not really that big of a deal, because no matter where this leg hits, it's still going to be hitting on the green. You'll just have a slightly more wonky star if you don't match. So that's your call. I'll stitch these together and then bring it and show it to you. I have my A sections sewn to my B sections, and once again we are pressing toward the star fabric, so it would be this way. It's getting bulky enough now that I'm going to go ahead and use the iron. Finger pressing isn't doing it for me anymore. Remember, when you're pressing, the first step is to press the seam as it was stitched, and then it's from the front. You're going to flip it toward where you want the seam. The seam's here, so I'm flipping up. So that's where I want it to be, and pressing. And again, we're not ironing, we're not scrubbing back and forth. It's just an up and down motion. I don't have any steam in this iron, and in our environment, steam is sometimes a good idea. So I'm going to do that with all of those. So now I have my AB units and my C units left to sew together. And again, we are going to straighten or square up on the edges that we're going to stitch together. So that's this edge on the AB unit and this edge on the C unit. And it's exactly the same process again. Just want to get a straight line going across. That's my AB. And then my C unit. And I just want to center this up on here. It's going to be a wonky star. It's not going to be perfect. And I just sew my 1/4 inch seam on all 5 of them. I have 5 stack and slash stars put together. You'll notice they're still raggedy around the edge. So the next step is to trim them all down to exactly 4.5 inch blocks. I'm using a 6 inch ruler to square out my star. Really, the only rule is that you want a 1/4 inch from your point at least, so that you don't chop your points off when you sew these stars together or to something else. So I'm using a 6 inch square ruler. You don't have to use a square ruler. I just find it a little bit easier to square up with something that is closer to the block size. So I have done 2 sides, and now, since I clean cut 2 of the sides, I need to line up my 4.5 inch mark here and here with my cut edge. And cut it off. And there's one 4.5-inch square, and I will do exactly the same thing to the other 4. The final step for this month is to take 4 of our 4.5-inch blocks and sew them together into a square. You can pick any 4 you want to. I've turned them all the same way in this one, but if you want to play with it, go ahead and rotate them different directions. It doesn't matter. They're stars and they're kind of wonky, so have fun with it if you choose. I'll sew those together. I'll show you one last time, and that'll be it for this month. There are my finished blocks. This is your homework and what you should bring in March on the first Thursday to get your free kit. Have fun.